Welcome to the Week 12 edition of the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi alongside Will Parkinson. As always, we had a snow globe game last night in Cleveland. The Browns upset the Steelers, who had been riding high. Great way to start the week off. Just a great setting for a football game. We got a lot to get into today, so I just want to remind you, show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network, and Game Time. Best tickets, best prices to get you in to anything at any time. So we kind of have banned Will from talking about the Jets' upcoming games because the Jets can't win games. But this week was once again on a bye week, nonetheless. Absolutely bananas in New York. Stories, firings, just craziness. I'm going to let you vent because I know you've been able to do that on some of your New York-based pods. Haven't done it here yet. But I do want to say, if you've seen Good Will Hunting, there's the scene near the end of the movie. Matt Damon's character, Will, by the way, and Robin Williams' character, the whole diagnosis and attention disorder, and he pushes back from love. Will, we're here to love you today. I'm here. It's not your fault. I'm giving you a big hug from across the state lines. And just go ahead. Joe Douglas fired as general manager. It is clear now that it looks like not only a new head coach, obviously a new GM, and a new quarterback. A big reset coming for the New York Jets this offseason.
Yeah, a couple of different things. I want to kind of start off with, obviously, look, the season could have gone a bunch of different ways. It ended up obviously going in the worst case scenario. I think the other worst case scenario would have been Rodgers getting hurt right away and then not knowing. I think that probably is the only other one that's worse because maybe Saleh and Douglas keep their jobs another year. I won't go down the whole thing, the whole timeline, but a couple of things that stand out here. One, Joe Douglas did do some nice things as Jets general manager. There's no question. We all like the talent on this roster. I still think part of the only reason this would be an appealing job going forward is actually some of the talent he built on this roster, both young and, and more guys either approaching extensions, who've gotten extensions, et cetera. You look at that defense, there's as much as they haven't played well this year, and I think there's a lot to do with that. There's still 5, 6, 7 really high-level starters on that defense going forward that are all 28 years old or younger, most of them actually early 20s. And, I've Quincy, Michael Carter, et cetera, guys on extensions. You have guys like Sauce Gardner approaching extensions, Jermaine Johnson, to name a few. You look on the offensive side of the football, frankly, not a lot of stuff actually is needed there outside of the obvious fix at probably at quarterback or just figuring out how to get Rodgers healthy or better or cutting bait. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could go there. But the offensive line, Olu Fashanu, 21 years old, will be there for quite a long time. The rest of that offensive line, if you bring back Morgan Moses, has actually played quite well on tape. Like it's a pretty decent group. Mm-hmm. The tight end group probably could use one more athletic body, but like if you bring back Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert and stuff, like serviceable group that won't cost you a lot of money. Receiver, Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams, like this isn't a barren roster. So Joe Douglas did do a good job there. But when you miss on quarterback 3 times, right? He had Sam Darnold in a year where he had a lot of flexibility cap-wise and draft capital-wise and missed on literally everybody. The 2020 draft, if folks remember, Joe Douglas selected Mekhi Becton. And, guys on the board there who, you would have loved it.
Tristan Wirfs, one of the best tackles in football, and has been pretty much since the day he walked in the league.
Yeah, and then there was the trickle-down effect of by taking Becton, who is a left tackle only, you had missed on then the next year on left tackles, and then you let Morgan Moses walk out of the building the first time because you didn't want Mekhi Becton to play right tackle, and you had to play George Fant there, and there's the whole kind of saga there, and they take AVT, who's been a nice player for them, although hurt, when they could have had Christian Darrisaw and not given up a 3rd-round pick in that trade that became Nico Collins. And, there's just a lot of that. And then ultimately, you miss on Sam Ray, who was not their guy, but was their guy, that regime. Gase was brought in, who Gase had to drive to Joe Douglas's house to give them that 6-year $20 million contract to get him to come to the Jets. Huge deal, which he lived out that almost the entire contract, all but 5 weeks of it. And they take Zach Wilson, and obviously, as anyone that listens to this podcast knows, obviously a gigantic miss. Mm-hmm. And, there's other misses in there. Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore. These are all top 40 picks. Big free agency signings. Carl Lawson over Trey Hendrickson, who people thought Trey Hendrickson was going to come to the Jets. He didn't. Mm-hmm. He goes to Cincinnati. He's been amazing, as we know. The Jets signed Carl Lawson, tears his Achilles the first year and was virtually useless. And not only did they do that, but then Carl Lawson was a 2-year deal. The third year that was zero guaranteed dollars. The Jets then restructure Carl Lawson's deal and give him $9 million guaranteed last year, and he now has dead money this year. By missing on Becton, they signed Dwayne Brown for a lot of money. That doesn't work, which means they signed Tyron Smith, which didn't work. There's just a lot there, and I guess it comes down to this, Mike. You can do a lot of nice things. You can be a good scout, but if you don't ever fix the offensive line until this year, you miss on quarterback 3 times, you miss on head coach twice, and more importantly, you never have more than 7 wins in a season, you're going to lose your job. And Woody Johnson meddled too much in the article. If anyone hasn't read it, by Diana Rossini and Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic, it's a good read. There's a lot of interesting nuggets in there. They let Bryce Huff walk for no apparent reason. And then they blame it on Woody Johnson getting involved last year at the end of the year. But Bryce was following the 2022 season, Bryce had a really nice year in terms of pressures, only 3.5 sacks. But it was actually, anyone that watched football, we talked about this a lot. It was like, this guy, if he's like playing like 20% of the snaps. If he plays any more, like he's going to explode. And guess what? Obviously, a 10-sack season. The Jets never offered him a contract, and that's bad work. He was on a restricted free agency tender. You could have traded him at any point. Last year, you could have traded him. They didn't do any of that. He walks for nothing. John Franklin Myers, the kind of the glue of this defense that was so good for a couple of years, really good against the run, could play all 4 spots, good pass rusher, but more importantly, like tough as nails, kind of police that locker room a little bit. The Jets eat $8 million and trade him to the Broncos for a 2025 5th-round pick. John Franklin Myers is one of the reasons the Broncos defense is so good this year. He's playing for the Broncos for a 2-year deal, which was worth the money he was going to get for 1 year with the Jets. It's very crappy there. Sheldon Rankins, Quentin Jefferson, a lot of names. Joe Douglas kind of gutted this defensive line and trades for Hassan Reddick, who's played 4 games, has had 1 game that he looked remotely decent. And the Jets give a 3rd-round pick for him. I mean, this is not there's just a lot there. And I guess in synopsis, like, he didn't build a great team. He built a really good roster. And again, I mean, you miss on these key places, left tackle, quarterback, head coach. And the Amazon team did the graphic yesterday, and, there's a lot of blame on Woody and blame on Aaron Rodgers and all these guys. Joe Douglas, 30-64 as general manager, which is almost 100 games in this day and era is a lot, man. And lastly, 0 playoff appearances, but 0 even winning seasons. That's where, to me, and outside of, even if you threw Jamie and Sherwood in there, right, as like the second, one guy received a multi-year extension under Joe Douglas as a homegrown player. That's Michael Carter II. He's the only guy that comes to mind as a surefire, huge hit outside of the top 40. That's, I'm sorry. And it is what it is. It's a shame it ended this way. I don't blame the Jets for firing him now. Bye week. He hasn't been doing anything. He's been checked out. And you don't blame Joe Douglas, right, when Woody has been meddling. But the Jets want to get a head start on their GM search. The season's obviously a wash. And here we are. It's nuts. We're in November talking about Rex Ryan and new GMs.
Yeah. So the GM search is the GM. I understand what they're saying about getting ahead of it, but obviously the desirable candidates are all still working right now. So yes, you can back channel. There's plenty of conversations that happen that shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't be happening. But whatever. To your point, Joe was checked out. Woody had frozen him out. The whole thing, it was over. Just get him out of the building. That's one less person you have to deal with. He doesn't have to worry about showing up anymore. He could kick his feet up. He's probably going fishing somewhere or something like that. It's remarkable where we started the season. And I think you and I, and like you're 12, 13, 14 wins, like we were really talking that had the potential with the way they built the roster. I think one of the big things for them this offseason is wherever they settle on, they got to figure out a way to make that defense what it was. Whether, as you talk about, like not having, aside from probably the quarterback position, not having this overwhelming need, but it's like you built something that the last 2 years prior to the season, that was a top 5 defense. Balled out, good quarterbacks, killed bad quarterbacks, but shut down good quarterbacks. Like the level of talent on all three levels of the defense, defensive line, linebacker level. defensive back as high as any defense that has in the league. You mentioned sort of the age group too, where you do have some of these guys are still under your control. But like, how do I get Sauce back to where Sauce was? How do I create this relentless front that's constantly pressuring quarterbacks and making life difficult? And you've got to do that if you want to get through the AFC, because we're talking about Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and then, maybe some of these young bucks, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line, we're talking about Drake May and that similar conversation. You've got to be able to do that. And to me, that's what their identity should be. Yeah. And I don't feel like they have an identity this year.
No, they have an identity. Their identity. No, seriously, their identity is this group's really talented and will roll over if you punch them in the face hard enough. And to be fair, sometimes this happens. We've seen this happen around the NFL. There's been talented teams many a times before the Jets, and there will be the super team many a times after the Jets. I'm a super team, just a team that's kind of constructed like this. And the one thing I think the big takeaway this week has been Woody Johnson, right? Joe Douglas was fired and everyone's crying wolf, and Woody meddled too much. Woody started meddling last year. He really meddled 2 years ago when they fired Mike LaFleur because Zach Wilson was horrible, and Mike LaFleur got everything out of everybody else except Zach Wilson, and they weren't going to give up on the quarterback yet, so they had to give up on someone had to heads to roll. You covered that, Mike. That's one of the first when we started really talking as much as we did, that Patriots-Jets game where Zach Wilson broke, and we talked a million times about it, and Devin McCourty said Bill was going to break his brain, and he did. And the Jets were 6-2. They finished that season 7-10. With the easy part of their schedule, majority of those games at home, all these teams going into the year that weren't supposed to be good. And yeah, obviously the Lions and Jaguars were better than they were supposed to be, but like inexcusable. And someone had to roll. And Woody started meddling then. That's already 3 years into this tenure. This isn't like, we're not talking year 1 or 2 where Joe Douglas drafted like 2 starters over 2 years and signed basically nobody relevant. So yes, Woody meddles too much. There'll be articles that'll come out about his kids and a million other things, and that stuff we'll cover when we get to it. And the Jets are a desirable job for somebody. No, I think ownership's going to play a big role there, and whether Woody decides to go the James Dolan route of being more hands-off, and it's worked for the Knicks, obviously. Does he continue to be hands-on in a David Tepper-like fashion? I don't know. We don't really know, and it's anyone's guess at this point, because this is what happens. Is Woody going to go overseas because of Donald Trump? How involved is Chris and his kids? There's so many questions. But a lot of owners are bad owners. I think the Chiefs, for all intents and purposes, the NFL survey goes out every year from the players. The Chiefs F across the board. But they hired the right coach, the right GM for the most part, even though whatever, and they have the right quarterback. And the Patriots, Bob Kraft unless I'm totally misremembering history, was not known as this amazing owner. But he got the head coach and the quarterback right? And he built whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. All these organizations, Jerry was a great owner in the 90s. Oh my God, Jerry Jones can't miss. Now Jerry's looked at as a horrible owner. So, I just, if you get the head coach and GM right, if you're any organization, the Jets, we'll talk about the Saints this offseason. We'll talk about the Cowboys and the Browns and the Eagles and all these teams. Good ownership or bad ownership, if you hire the right people, it doesn't effing matter. And that's what it's going to come down to for the Jets, plain and simple. Definitely would like the Woody to meddle less, but not for nothing. Lazard in the 4 for Jerry Jeudy and a huge contract. Does Woody know ball? like, I don't know. He wanted Davante Adams. I mean, it's not like some of these moves aren't the worst thing ever. Some of them are pretty awful, but some are not terrible. Yeah, he benched Tony Adams. That was the
yes, that was that.
Not Michael Clemens though, just Tony Adams.
No, just I get this. This is the problem. I always wonder who they're listening to, right? Because you can't tell me Woody Johnson knows a hell of a lot about football, even though he's owned the football team for a long time. And so what leads him to say you have to bench Tony Adams? Like, who's in his ear? Is it like, some of that stuff is just remarkable. And to your point, like, we hear about the bad owners and the bad owners stepping in. It was obviously early in Kraft's tenure where he had to stopwatch out for Tabucky Jones, I think it was, at some workout. It's like, dude, you're the owner of the football team. You made your money in the paper business. Like, I get it. It's your money. It's your investment. In theory, you can do whatever you want, but if you want to be a good owner, you just have to find the right people to do the business for you. And You know, basically when that lined up in New England, it was hands off. You just go do your thing. And, now they've clearly tried to get their football team back after they
Yeah,
fired
they've been
Bill.
too hands-on, and guess what? People don't like Bob Kraft
No,
anymore as much. So
no, they don't. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating offseason. Look, there's going to be more, as you mentioned, there'll be more stories. It'll be fascinating right on through. Hirings and firings and finding a coach and drafting and all these different things. Let's go to the Patriots at 3-8, visiting the Miami Dolphins, who still have some playoff hopes at 4-6. Dolphins have won 2 in a row with Tua at quarterback. They are now a game and a half out of the seventh and final spot in the AFC, and they have the they have the third easiest remaining strength of schedule. So it is possible. I look at this one and I say, I love to just say, who's the more desperate team? And obviously the Patriots are trying to establish something here, and they've been a little bit frisky. But for the Dolphins, this is a critical game. If your season will end if you lose to the Patriots, and that's when you'll look back on and go, how the bleep did we lose to a team that I think the Patriots have lost their last 4 in Miami? So it's been a house of horrors even when Belichick was the head coach and they were rolling with Tom Brady, but certainly has been the case lately. So how are they going to handle that? How are they going to handle Patriots? How will they handle the speed, right? Because this is, as I think as Christian Gonzalez was saying, it's probably the fastest team in the league, and I don't think you can really argue between Achane and Mostert and Hill and Waddle, and they bring guys off the bench that can fly. In the past, they've had a decent plan with this. Belichick's last year, there was the sort of keep everybody in front of you, force Tua to nickel and dime you. At times, they tried to get aggressive and be physical, but this is a tough matchup. Obviously, I just think the way Miami is playing right now, they're averaging 28 points per game since Tua's come back in the 4 starts that he's made. So it just feels like they're going to need to have a big offensive output in Miami, and I don't know that they're quite there just yet.
This just makes you – I know what I said at the beginning of the year, and I'm sure I'm contradicting myself. It just makes it more frustrating we didn't get to see Drake May twice against the Dolphins. Just the way that game played out and how much I felt like even week 2 of Drake May, week 1 of Drake May starting would have looked so much better than what we did. I think this would be an interesting test, as you mentioned, for New England. And I feel like I say this every week with them, but like this year is so much about how you respond positively and negatively. This is how much can you build on success? Can you rebound from? I think the Patriots have been way more impressive to me this year than I was expecting, if I'm being honest. If you told me they won 1 or 2 games this year going into the year, I would have been like, yeah, I don't know. You might be right. Even if they win 4 or 5, like 3 or 4, they're probably kicking themselves they didn't win already. They're playing competitively against some good teams, or at least talented teams. I'm just looking for a not Jacksonville effort from them. I'm looking for Drake May's built on every week. He might win Rookie of the Year. Like, all seriousness, Jaden Daniels has fallen off a cliff. I know he's hurt. Caleb's been up and down. Yep. Mostly down. Neighbors started out hot, and my point being, like, there's real reason for optimism here, and the Dolphins defense does not scare you, and in my opinion, at least. Even like the Bills game, they got so much credit. Oh my God, they played so well, and it's like you have 30 points. It's like and so you can run on this team, you can throw the ball around. I'd like to see a lot of Ramondre this week. Like truly commit to, even if it doesn't work the first 2 or 3 drives, like we're gonna stick with the run game and let Drake May get in some play action, some easy screen game, maybe just get him in these easy spots where then you open it up a little bit as the game goes on, whether you're winning or losing. At least I like to see them continue to have that identity. And then lastly, from a Dolphins point of view, look, they figured it out the last couple of weeks. If they want a shot at the playoffs, you have got to win this game. And I expect the Dolphins to win this game. They've had so much success over New England recently. It's, the way the Jets used to get dominated by New England right now, it feels like the way Miami dominates New England, and then Buffalo dominates Miami and the whole thing. And then the Jets and Bills kind of go back and forth. I'd like to see, like, can they do something different with Tua? Can they just I feel like Tua had Bill's number for whatever reason. I can't really figure out. It's like the anomaly. Tua is the anomaly of like guys that young quarterbacks always struggle against New England. It's always been a thing. Immobile quarterbacks even worse. I don't know. I just wouldn't like. Can they? We talked so much last week, Mike. You talked so much about. I love the offensive plan. I loved how May played. I love the heart the defense played with, but the defensive plan sucked.
Mm-hmm.
Can it be the heart and energy they played with last week and just something different? Throwing different looks at Tua. The one thing I will say, and the one thing that is still clear, and I'm not trying to be a dick here, Tua does not want to get hit. And I don't blame him at all. We can say the same thing about Rodgers and all these guys. Like, Brady didn't want to get hit. None of these guys want to get hit, right? But I'd rather sell out. If you're going to sell out against somebody and you get beat by Tyreek, you get beat. Like, if that's who's going to beat you, even though Tyreek's not been the same player this year for a million different reasons, get Tua on the ground early in the first quarter and be like, okay, like, this is the game we're going to play. So if you're ready to strap up and do it, like, Tua's a tough dude. But yeah, I'd like to see the Patriots get after the Dolphins a little bit and say, hey, man, like, Mike McDaniel, I know you have a great running scheme. Like, I want you to commit to that, and I want you to beat us that way. You're not going to beat us with Tyreek and Waddle and all these guys, and we're going to hit Tua. So you better be committed and ready to really go for it, because I don't know. Sometimes I think to myself, like, teams are so obsessed with it, and then McDaniel will get away from the run. It's like Kyle too in San Francisco. It's like, I don't know. That's just kind of where I land on this game. I expect the Dolphins to win, but I'd like to see the Patriots get a little spunky here.
Yeah, some interesting points there. The offense has looked different with Tua, and I don't just mean because they're scoring points, but it's almost in the way it's been designed. And I think a lot of that revolves around the fact that they don't want Tua to get hit. I mean, you never want your quarterback to get hit, but like, I think it's even more so. Now all of a sudden you're seeing, I think Achane has 23 catches in the last 4 games. Jonnu Smith all of a sudden is 16 or 17 catches, 18 catches, something in the last 4 games. Like, and that's all designed, simple, swing passes, check downs, design tight end screens, quick stuff over the middle, because they want to get the ball out of his hands. And look, he's hitting 73.5% of his passes right now. I mean, he's leading the league in completion percentage, but it's clear that from that perspective, if you're the Patriots, to your point, be physical. Be physical at the line of scrimmage. Get your hands on those guys. Don't give Jonnu Smith a free release. Make sure there are eyes on Achane. Get a piece of Tyreek. Be physical. Jonathan Jones talked about it this week, said, like, we've seen teams that can do it. They've done it before when they've had some success slowing them down by being physical with those guys. And for whatever reason, Waddle in this sort of new version of the offense has not been featured all that much.
Yeah,
which that's probably the kiss of death for the Patriots right there.
Oh, he's going for 187 and 2 tutties.
yeah. And they've had some issues with him in the past, so I shouldn't, you can't overlook him. But it is interesting. I'm curious to see the plan. I think it's a big week for DeMarcus Covington to get that defense right, because Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay absolutely owned them last week. And I want to touch on one more thing before we go. For those of you who followed the story, Alex Van Pelt spoke to us on Thursday, and he was asked, hey, you finally used Marcus Jones, your nickel corner, actually probably now your second corner behind Christian Gonzalez. You finally used him on offense, and he'd been a good offensive player in limited role as a rookie. He had, I think, 19 snaps, but 4 touches and a touchdown, long touchdown against the Bills, and then got hurt early last year. And, Marcus, he texted me. I was like, well, who's this Marcus Jones? Like, because I figured Marcus would talk to me on the field if this was my Marcus Jones. He said, I'm Googling Marcus Joneses. I ran across a Marcus Jones in Green Bay. Why would he be texting me? And then one of the coaches said, no, it's our Marcus. He wants to talk to you. And Marcus said, hey, I can help on offense. Here's the problem with that. It's great. Like, I want to step forward, Marcus Jones. I can help, and he can help. He's probably their best guy with the ball in his hands. And you see that on his punt returns in particular. Alex Van Pelt didn't know that Marcus Jones had played offense for the Patriots. And so the immediate thing is like dereliction of duty. How did you not know that? But my brain spins ahead and says, Gerard Mayo, DeMarcus Covington.
I was just going to say this.
Brian Belichick, Tyler Hughes, who's now the wide receiver coach, he was an offensive assistant that year in 2022. Who else? Oh, Mike Pellegrino, the cornerbacks coach. They were all here. How does nobody say to Alex, especially in the first 5 weeks when you're struggling to score points, hey, bud, this guy, and you see him on punt returns, he's freaking good with the ball in his hands. You might want to think about it. A play here or a play there. Just like what they're doing now for Pop Douglas. Pop doesn't fit their scheme. He's not going to be out there a lot in the 12 personnel because they just don't want him outside. He's not that kind of player. He's a little dude. But they're finding ways now the last couple of weeks to get him 4 or 5 touches a game. And you see it. He gets a little quick hitter. Boom. Makes a guy miss. It's 12, 15, 16 yards, just like that. Easy little chunk play, right? And so to me, it just was sort of pile it on top of the things that have fallen through the cracks this year with this new coaching staff. And, the old coaching staff wasn't very good at the end. That's why Bill's not here. He built a bad roster and there was a bad coaching staff. But now we're getting a young coaching staff, inexperienced coaching staff that's let far too many things happen this year that you go, man, if you just had your head out of your ass for a second, this wouldn't happen. So I don't know, just one of those things. Like, I was getting ready for Boston Sports Journal to write a nice piece on Cole Strange making his comeback from the torn patellar tendon and all the stuff that he's gone through, talked about like had to relearn how to walk, like this whole thing really, kind of, I don't know, it's an uplifting story, right? The guy really had to work his ass off and it might be a few weeks away from playing, but it looks like he's going to get back on the field and play in an actual game before the season's over. And that's like good for him. And then this happens. And I'm like, man, I don't want to kill him, but like, how do you not talk about this? That's like a huge breakdown in communication for an organization that preached under the new regime. It was all about collaboration and breaking down silos. Well, how do you not communicate when you're collaborating? And that's, just another reason in part why they're 3-8. Let's hear from Game Time now. We love going to football games. Obviously, that is our first sport, Will and I, primary sport. We make our living off of it. But we love other sports too. And it's always great to just be in the building and to get that vibe as a fan. Like we get it as covering the games, and you still sometimes get like, oh man, it's a big game. I'm excited to be in the building for this. Well, with Game Times, they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. I've talked about it. You've talked about how we use them. I'm sure there are going to be plenty of times during this basketball season when I go see the best team in the NBA, even though they're not record-wise right now, the Boston Celtics, the defending NBA champs. Well, maybe, who knows, the Knicks come to town, I might have to partake so I can boo Karl Anthony Towns in person. All you got to do here, folks, is you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Oh, it is game time. This is not a game we're going to talk about. Sort of much like we did with the Jets, we're going to stay in the Jersey, New York area and talk about the Giants, who we're taping this on Friday. It's about 1:15 in the afternoon. Short time ago, they released, granted, Daniel Jones, their starting quarterback, in just his second year of that 4-year, $160 million extension. His release, he had been, after the bye week, they decided to bench him. There's a whole injury component to this where if he's hurt in the next 5 or 6 games, they would owe him $23 million of his $30 million next year. So you knew this was coming. They're a 2-8 football team. It's a bad football team. I'm not sure that you knew that Tommy DeVito was going to jump Drew Lock, who they signed in the offseason to be the backup. But yes, that's the return of Tommy Cutlets. Jones, before he got his release, spoke to the media yesterday or Thursday, and it was an emotional sort of thing. You could tell, like, for as badly as it's gone for the most part of his tenure, that he still liked being a Giant and trying to carry on that legacy here. Just, other than the first season with Brian Dable and Joe Shane, it didn't fly for him. And I guess to me, this isn't so much about Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock. This is about Brian Dable and Joe Shane, the general manager. It was about a month ago, John Mara, the owner, said, they're safe, they're secure. I've been getting rumblings that there's that maybe that's not the case anymore. And I guess for what do you need to see? Is there anything that you can see, Will, from here on out that would make you, if you were John Mara, be convinced that yes, these guys deserve another crack at this?
A couple of different things there. So the Giants are very lucky that the Jets have been as bad as they have.
Yes.
Even though I would argue the Giants' dysfunctions there's just no expectation. There's been no expectations for a while.
Yeah.
Look, Daniel Jones was overdrafted. I thought he had a really nice rookie year. If you really go back and look at it, it was very productive. He had a fumbling problem and a turnover problem, but he was much more Baker now, where it was like high variance in terms of like a lot of touchdowns, a lot of interceptions. I mean, 24 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, as a rookie, like, and not even, I think it was like 12 or 13 games, like pretty impressive. The Tampa Bay game, that's for the Danny Dimes thing. And look, Jones got overpaid. It was really a 2-year deal after a 15 touchdown. I think he had, 8 or 9 rushing yards as well, but, or 8 or 9 rushing touchdowns as well. But 15 touchdowns, 8 picks, and winning record. Had a really nice playoff game against Minnesota. The Giants were caught between a rock and a hard place. In reality, they should have probably just let him walk, given Saquon a 2 or 3 year deal at the time, and then drafted a quarterback. They obviously didn't do that. It was a bad quarterback class. Last year, they tried to get away from Daniel Jones. They tried to trade with the Patriots. We saw it on Hard Knocks. They wanted Drake May. They wanted Jaden Daniels. Here's my issue with how the Giants handle this thing. Very similar to, it's really homegrown Russell Wilson. Huge dead cap hit, the injury guarantee. A couple of different things don't sit right with me. Why'd you play him this long if he was the problem? Kind of arrogant, in my opinion, to continue to week after week send him out there knowing he's an issue. No one has any bones about it. He has been an issue this year. But if you're so comfortable, why are you so comfortable being bad again? That's to me where I struggle of how arrogant are you that you think that your job is so safe after a year in which you picked in the top 6? You're going to, again, we talked about the Jets. I mean, the arrogance that how could you possibly, not for nothing, there's very real chance that come January 8th or January 9th is Black Monday in the NFL. What if Bill Belichick starts really getting in people's ear with the Maras and the Tishes and says, I take this job. If it's open, I'm just telling you, I'll take it. I'll fix this thing. I'll draft a quarterback, Shador, probably not Shador, or Cam Ward or Jalen Miller, whatever it is. Quinn Ewers, whoever the guy is, or we're going to go sign Darnold and we'll bridge it. And I can win 11 games with this team next year. Watch. You're all of a sudden out of a job, because that's what's going to happen. If I like Brian Daboll, I think I like him a little better as an OC than I do as a head coach, but this guy's won coach of the year. I'm not crapping on him. I like Joe Shane. I like the process generally, but Deontay Banks, bad signing. Bad draft pick. Kayvon Thibodeau, I don't know. I'm not super. Evan Neal, colossal bust. Andrew Thomas gave him the big deal, and he's played 7 games since they gave him the deal in 2 years. Not their fault, but foot injuries back-to-back years or whatever it is. That's not great. I say all that to say, they're gonna, for context, they'll get out of $78 million they owed him over the next 2 years. $22 million dead cap next year, and they get out of the $23 million injury guarantee. I think they paid him. There's $67 million in dead cap the Giants will accrue for this. It's the same as cutting him in March, I guess. Right? It is, but from all reports, there was a moment there where I think, from what I saw, at least from some reputable people, Jones was willing to waive his injury guarantee. You had him run the scout team yesterday. That doesn't really bother me. We all played football. It happens. I was hurt when I was hurt in college. It's what you do, right? Hey, you're not playing this week. Can you go through, walk through, and run? Stand there as a body. Sure. It's more that they cut him, and he gave the goodbye. The whole thing just felt messy. And then Daboll today, we didn't expect this. I mean, what do you want the guy to you what? Right. That's to me where buddy, I don't. Come on,
that comment made no sense to me whatsoever.
It's kind of just dumb.
You're benching the guy. Everybody knows you're benching the guy, and you're not going back to him. You signed Tim Boyle to be the third quarterback. Daniel Jones. Most teams in this situation just say, just go home. You don't have to come to the building. You're still going to get your check, but like, we don't need you playing safety on the scout team. We just don't. We're not going to do that. Not going to. We'll give you that respect that we're not going to do that to you, no matter how it worked. And for him to say that, like, you didn't think he was going to go to Amara, who he has a good relationship with, and say, "Hey, John, what the hell? Can I? I don't. Give me a chance to start someplace fresh. Like, you're going to cut me anyway. To your point, the money doesn't really matter. You're still going to be on the hook for what you're going to be on the hook for. So yeah, but this an interesting part of it then that says to me, like, again, to sort of as Mara starting to waver on the whole Dable Shane get another year by granting Daniel Jones the release. I don't know. It's the Bill Belichick to the Giants thing would be fascinating in a million ways. And I've heard people say that like there would be no appetite for him coming back. Like this is in years past, but now that your franchise has bottomed out again, and to your point, probably in a top 5 position again, maybe, who knows, the way things are going, you end up with the number 1 pick in the draft. Bill will turn that, by the way, into a 1, 2, 3 3s, 4 4s, 5 5s, in 2026, 28, 29. But that's a lot of capital to play with, and a chance to sort of, if you hit it right, to rebuild pretty quickly. I don't want to say the Giants are irrelevant, but as you said, like they keep losing. It's like they had this one little blip with Dable in the first year, but what was it before that? What is it now? Like when you talk about I don't know that we've even talked about the Giants once since the season started on this pod.
Yeah.
Maybe Malik Neighbors. Maybe at some point we were just talking about how good the rookie class had started off, and maybe Neighbors got a mention. But like as a group, we never said, "Oh, the Giants game is a big game this week." Nope, they haven't played a big game since Dable's first year.
Daniel Jones was just listed on the Cowboys roster.
People are getting yeah. There's a lot of buzz about.
So I just Googled it. If you search Daniel Jones Cowboys on Google, the Cowboys website pops up with roster. Daniel Jones' name is listed. They must have deleted it, but it's still up. It's quite comical. I would love nothing more than Daniel Jones to start against the Giants in 7 days or 6 days time.
Someone is messing around because he's on waivers until 4 on Monday,
and no one's obviously going to take that contract, and he will. So
he's going to pass through, and then not out of a possibility. Danny Dimes versus Tommy Cutlets on Thanksgiving.
I just wanted one last thing on the Giants because I want to move on to a couple of these games. The Tommy DeVito thing, I don't mean to be a hater here, and I'm going to sound like I'm being an ass. I get it. He's awful. Yeah. It's a fun story. It was a fun story last year. Him beating the Patriots last year and the Packers cost the Giants Drake May and Jane Daniels. If I'm Drew Lock, I'm red hot. I'm like, you should have cut me too. Why am I here? Right. I'd asked for my release this morning. Be like, dude, I could go play for the Raiders right now. I could go sign with whoever. I don't know. I could go sign with whoever and hope that I can latch on as a backup. I can go sign with Philly right now and say, I know I'm better than Kenny Pickett. Like, I want to make the playoff roster, and God forbid something happens to Jalen Hurts. Like, I got you. What are we doing? Fun story. This felt like my conspiracy is like Dable and Shane want, DeVito to play because it's like, see, we couldn't do anything about these awful quarterbacks, and it's all ownership's fault. Like, what do you want us to do?
Yeah, but you signed Drew Lock to be the backup when you knew you were going to have a problem this year, or you knew it was a potential problem.
There's no way that Brian Dable watched the tape of these two and was like, yeah, Cutlets time. There's no shot.
None. Quick tweet from Dan Duggan, who covers the Giants to The Athletic. His read on the Daniel Jones release: it's mutually beneficial, but the Giants weren't going to make the first move. If Jones was fine showing up every day and going through the motions as QB4, they would have gone along with that. But once he asked out, they obviously were going to grant him that wish. So there is that. The Giants will certainly be in the market for a quarterback. probably 2 this offseason, and feels like a coach and a general manager as well. Let's go to what I think, for me at least, is the game of the week, and some would argue this, but 49ers at Packers. Packers came off the bye, didn't look great, have to block a field goal against Chicago to win the game. 49ers obviously have now lost 3 of their last 4 losses by 3 points or fewer. They lose another division game late to the Seahawks last week. And now Brock Purdy, limited in practice on Thursday with a shoulder, unknown if he goes. Nick Bosa, Trent Williams also did not practice on Thursday. Bosa doesn't appear like he's going to be playing this week. At 5-5, even though they're just a game out of first place in the division, although they are, what's their record here in the division? I think they're 1-3 in the division. So they're going to lose pretty much every tiebreaker in the division. They got to start stacking some wins together. We keep expecting it to turn, and it's not turned for them. They're not the same football team. I think you talked about this when we did the preview pod way back in August. Like, they played a lot of football. They're relying on a lot of guys that have been injury prone in the past. You're seeing those injuries pop up. You're seeing sort of the attrition of playing all that football pop up. And is this it? Is this like the last hurrah for this group? And is it just going to go away with like a sputter? Or are they going to be able to make one last push and find themselves in the postseason dance in January?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. I think this is like one of those odd games where both teams, I think the expectations, very, very varying reasons. Injury is, both teams have dealt with a myriad of injuries. This game feels bigger for the Niners. Just it's weird because the division for the Niners, even if they lose this, is still gettable. But you get to a point where it's like, is this just, it's the end of an era here? A lot of talented guys, and, is it like, are we next year talking about, hey, a full reset, and like, we kind of sell off almost all of our big pieces. We take one bad year and then we go back to it because we know we can. I've seen a lot of talk of, is this it for Kyle Shanahan?
Which should be
There's a lot of Andy Reid in Philly vibes where it's like, geez, how'd you not get, how'd they never win a title? And these teams are amazing every year. And, the big game, like always the big game conversations, the late game stuff with Andy Reid, and the late game stuff with Kyle Shanahan, offensive mind, a lot of parallels. Letting Kyle Shanahan walk out of that building would be idiotic. And he's more than just the head coach in that building. But there's a lot of frustration with this Niners fan base, I think, built up over a 6-7 year period here where they've almost won 3 titles and they haven't. And it's like, you almost sometimes you hit a wall. It's like they did such a good job of coming back from that NFC title loss 2 years ago, where they started off a similar way they started off this year. But they're not as good defensively this year.
No.
They're not as good offensively. They've got so many guys that have gotten hurt. The depth is not the same. They're losing these games they shouldn't be losing. I don't know. They might surprise us and they come out on Sunday afternoon and they look fantastic. But something tells me this might be Debo's probably done here after the year. McCaffrey's got, I believe, one more year, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to have to pay Purdy at some point. I don't know. Trent Williams is kind of feels year by year. It's like, I don't know. I'm just at a loss with the Niners because I feel like I thought they'd regress to like 10-7, but I also didn't think McCaffrey would miss half the year. And
now he's come back. He doesn't have the same burst. Ayuk obviously done for the year. Debo is not the same player anymore.
Kittle's hurt. Trent Williams is amazing still, but like we know he's probably, I don't know. Something's off, obviously. And then you look at Green Bay and it's like, they're not going to catch Detroit, in my opinion, unless maybe things could happen. I don't know. They got him one more time, obviously, but this feels like if you're Green Bay, this is huge. If I can know I'm over the Niners no matter what happens the rest of the year. You know what I mean? Like that's to me. And I also feel like when you look at, I look at Green Bay and I just think it's looked good. It hasn't looked unbelievable. I know they're 7-3, but like felt like they got a little lucky last weekend. They got, the Lions felt like they steamrolled them. It was close against Jacksonville. It probably shouldn't have been. They got Niners, Dolphins, Lions. Not easy. You could easily lose 2 of the 3. And all of a sudden you're staring at like, are we going to be a 10-7 team and be a 6 seed 7? Like, they don't want that. They want to be the 5. They want to be where you're going head to head with Minnesota, who's already beaten you. And not for nothing, Minnesota's got hard games, but like, I don't know, Minnesota's got Chicago, Arizona, tough, but good matchup, honestly, for Minnesota, the way they play physically. Atlanta, I'm
you don't know what team you're going to get with Atlanta. But
Chicago again, Seattle, and then I don't know. This game's juicy, but like I felt like going into the year, this could have been like, ooh, title game preview, and I don't know. If the Niners could get hot, they have the pedigree to do so, and Green Bay did it last year. I mean, this was literally an elite playoff game last year, but something doesn't feel great. I'll say about either. I don't know if Detroit's just skewed my brain so much this year where like everybody looks like crap because Detroit's looked so good. But yeah, the Niners need this one. I know it's in Green Bay, but 5-6 is just, and 2 losses. I don't know, that you start to really look at it and it's like, man, I don't know. I know, the Rams have Philly this week, but like there's a good chance it's 7-4, 6-5, 6-5, and you're sitting at 5-6 and having lost some division games, you're kind of in a bad spot. And you're not making a wild card at, maybe you do, but probably not at 9-8. Like, I don't know if this is the year to get in if you keep losing these tiebreakers.
For sure. On the Packers, doesn't look like Jair Alexander's going to play this week. PCL tear in his knee, might be multiple weeks for him. I did want to point out, so their offense has gone 20 or fewer points in back-to-back, and that was splitting the bye week. Kind of felt like last week they'd come back, even though Chicago's defense is pretty good, and after the bye week be refreshed and be explosive. But we're still waiting on the second half of Jordan Love from last year to show up this year. Just a few numbers for you. 1 touchdown pass over the last 3 games for Love. Obviously been dealing with the groin in addition to the knee thing. Per Next Gen Stats, he is 31st out of ranked passers on third downs, 34th versus man-to-man, dead last against the blitz, and 32nd in tight window throws. He's got to lock in if they're going to be what we thought they could be. And what they've, at various points, there's been a couple moments this season where like, oh yeah, that's the team. That's the team that's going to be really dangerous. And again, to your point, plenty of football left, still can get dangerous. If he gets hot, they have the chance to be that team because he was that good in the second half last year. But for as important it is for San Francisco with the way their defense is, this feels like a game where Jordan could find his mojo back again. And if he didn't, I'd start to worry if I was Green Bay. So that's just my thoughts on that. We'll get to the last one here. I never thought that we'd be talking about this game in week 12. The 6-4 Cardinals going to visit the 5-5 Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. The Hawks win this game and the Rams lose to Philly. Seattle would descend to first place. Arizona currently in first place. Arizona 2-0 in the division. Seattle 1-2 in the division. So critical on a bunch of different fronts. By the way, the second best record in the division in terms of divisional play are the Rams. Your guys at 2-1 in the division. As I mentioned earlier, Niners 1-3 in the NFC West. I look at this one like Arizona's. They're dangerous. They're a dangerous team. They're playing well. They're playing confident. I still don't love their defense, but the way their offense is playing, the way Kyler's playing, it's been pointed out in a bunch of different places. Orlovsky's like gone bananas for Kyler. Thinks he's playing. I think he said the best quarterback in the league right now. But I actually think this comes down to, can Arizona run the football in Seattle? Arizona's been great running the football this year with obviously Kyler and what he brings to the table, but James Conner, 5-1 when Conner goes over 100 scrimmage yards in a game. 68 forced missed tackles. That leads the league as well for Conner. And they're averaging 150 yards per game. Seattle gives up a ton per game. They haven't yet fixed their problems. They've already bounced Tyrell Dotson, one of their starting linebackers. He's out. They made a trade for a DT. They're doing all sorts of different things here to try to shore up that defense as Mike McDonald tries to find the right pieces. It's going to be loud there. This game has a lot of juice. Honestly, I don't know what Seattle team's going to show up because they're not as good as the 3-0 start, but they weren't as bad as the stretch that they had. Gino leads them to a big win last weekend against San Francisco in San Francisco, puts the fans to sleep. It's very nice. This was a fascinating game to me. I'm really curious to see what Gannon's got in his second year versus what McDonald's got in his first year as head coach. If Kyler can continue this trend, if Geno Smith can answer the call, because he's certainly capable.
Yeah, both teams kind of big swing game, as you mentioned. You go to 7-4 if you're Arizona, with a chance of, the Rams got a really tough game and Niners got a really tough game. And obviously you take a 2-game lead in the division out of nowhere. Obviously we saw the Cardinals eviscerate the Rams in week 2. I'm interested to see this game from two point of views. One, you mentioned the coaches. I feel like Seattle, Mike McDonald talked about this, but starting to take on his identity. They're starting to play a little bit closer to what he's looking for, obviously. And then I look at the other side of the coin in Arizona. First time all year, starting to get a lot of praise. They beat the piss out of the Jets, and okay, things calm down. Kyler's in New York, eating pizza with some random dude, and the whole thing. And now you got a little expectation. Now it's a little bit of like first time all year, you're the the hunted, not the hunter. And I'm curious how that's going to look. I always think there's big swing points in seasons. And like I said, I just wondered to myself, like, Seattle, this was like hey, you weren't supposed to win this game. You eked it out of nowhere. And like, you're really, like, who are you as a team? And then Arizona, like, Rex Ryan's going on, PMT today talking about how they're one of the 5 scariest teams to go try to win a title this year because of the physicality they play with and all these different things. It's like, dude, we were not talking about Arizona this way 4 or 5 weeks ago. And so I want to see how each team responds. And again, this is both these quarterbacks are feels like just a lot of this. It's a lot of up and down. It's a lot of mostly up this year for Kyler, obviously, and Geno's been a little all over the place. Which guy doesn't make the crucial turnover, and which team establishes a physical presence at the line of scrimmage will win this football game? I'd be really impressed if Arizona takes another one here. And they're like 7-4. They've now beaten everyone in the division. They've got some good wins. Even their losses, looking back, like the Buffalo game, they actually looked really good in the first half early on in the year. And you look back at some of these games, you're like, oh, okay, you smoked Chicago, smoked the Jets, smoked the Rams. The Niners game was exciting. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited for this one. I just think there's a classic NFC West, I apologize. Establish the line of scrimmage, kind of beat each other's face in a little bit, and which quarterback, makes the least mistakes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's a fun game. It could really be, for Arizona, sort of a statement type win, even though, again, Seattle's 5-5, just in terms of where the program is headed and how they played this season. Just quickly, who you got in the Harbaugh Bowl? Jim or John?
I'm going to go Chargers. I just feels like the Ravens are just in that, like, there's again, I know it's always one or two things, but like the Ravens finally figured out like the pass defense last week, but they didn't play Justin Herbert. And I feel like the Chargers, the line of scrimmage, are just as physical as the Ravens are. And I don't know. I just like, does Jesse Minter have something in his bag, right, for a guy that he probably called up Mike McDonald, like, hey man, you went against this guy in practice. Like, what do I do? Like, what am I going to do here? And yeah, I don't know. The Ravens the Chargers need this game a little more, I feel like, just because, again, not as talented of a team. You got to get any type of win head to head. And if you're the Chargers, we talked about them. Can they win a playoff game? You win this one, you're kind of in the driver's seat for that 5 seed. And now you're like, ooh, I could be Houston on the road.
Yep.
Ooh. Now maybe another team upsets another team. Like, I'm not enough to play Kansas City. I don't know. I like Chargers feel hungry right now, and I feel like they almost chargered themselves last week, and the fact that they didn't gives me confidence that maybe that was not the same old Chargers.
No, we survived, and Joey Bosa was making that point. Like, let's not be the same old Chargers. And there was a moment there where it looked like it was going in that direction, and they pulled it out. I like the way you're thinking there. I'm a little down on the Ravens right now and the way they're playing and their inability to sort of clean some of the things up. It's time for Prize Picks, but before we do Prize Picks, I should tell you what Prize Picks is all about. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Pick has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players and up to 6 to win up to 100 times your cash. Like James Cook, do you think, in pass, he goes off. So now who's the guy this week? Who's the guy who's going to score touch? Derrick Henry. You think more than half a touchdown for Derrick Henry? Seems to find the end zone each and every week. Lamar going to have a bounce back game. You're going to take more passing yards, more rushing yards for him. All these things you sort of can consider and play with and then run with on Prize Picks. So download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code CLNS. You get 50 off after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win that $5 bet, wager, whatever you want to call it. Scratch that. I don't think I'm supposed to use those words. Prize Picks, folks. Run your game. And here we go. Drum roll. I've got 4 for you. Justin Herbert. Rushing yards. More than 18.5. I think you've seen it. He's healthy now, and he is willing and able to run the football and run it effectively. Play man, you turn your back on him. He doesn't like what he sees. And quite frankly, some of his receivers have a hard time getting open. Tuck it and run. He had some big runs against Cincinnati. DeAndre Swift against the Minnesota defense. I'm going to take the less than 55.5 rushing yards for him. They've been sort of a stop and start team all year long with the run game. And a couple more from that Patriots Dolphins game. Drake May more than 221.5 yards passing. I think they're kind of at that stage now where they're just letting them be free a little bit more, let them launch the football. And I think there's going to be a need to score points in this game. And I think that's going to necessitate him chucking the rock. And finally, Hunter Henry, more than 44.5 yards receiving. What do you got?
Drake May more in terms of rushing yards. I just think that similar to you, I like the way he runs the football, and I think he'll do more than enough of that. I also like Kyler Murray more rushing yards. I think this is going to be a game where he's going to have to use his legs, create a little bit, and get out there and kind of do some good different stuff there. I'm going to go Christian Watson, less receiving yards. I just feel like the Niners need this game so badly, and I feel like the weather and snow in there and the whole thing, I don't know. I could see this being a smash mouth, like Kyle being like, I don't know, McCaffrey, how long McCaffrey's going to be here. Here's 67 touches, and we're going to control the clock. Those are my 3. Watson, less receiving yards. Drake May, more rushing yards. Kyler Murray, more rushing attempts as well.
Drake May, more passing. Hunter Henry, more receiving. DeAndre Swift, less rushing. Justin Herbert, more rushing. And that is going to put a wrap on this week's preview edition of the Week 12 of the NFL football season, the All 32 pod. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, rate, review, do the whole 9 yards. You'd be helping Will and I out here on the CLNS Media Network. We will see you on Monday with a recap of the week that was.